Palmerbet with the big don't argue. Punters will love that. Download our app today and enjoy tackle-busting benefits with great promos, great odds and same-game multi this footy finals at Parramnatta. Gamble responsibly. For Gamblers' Help, call 1-800-858-858.
Welcome everyone to Fergo and the Freak. I'm your host, the Glorious League Freak. This is episode 451 and I'm joined by our good friend Elliott Richardson, who's a Parramatta Eels fan. How's it going, Elliott?
Not bad, mate. Thanks for having me on.
Now,
good to be back.
Yeah. Like I was just saying then, like I said that we'd get you back on later in the year and hopefully it would be for some big clash between the Panthers and the Eels, and like we made it a good one, hey?
Yeah, it just happens to be the biggest game of all.
Yeah. It's funny because I feel as though the Panthers and Eels, they didn't really have a huge rivalry. It was kind of they were Western Sydney like neighbours and stuff, but there was not a huge rivalry. But I think that this year and then now we've got a grand final and stuff, I think we might finally have a bloody rivalry. What do you reckon?
Well, yeah, I think so too. It's interesting hearing whenever the rivalry between Parramatta and Penrith is discussed, it always seems to come from the side of Penrith players who grew up in the district and played against Parramatta.
Mm.
And I never really heard it from the Parramatta side. Like I've never heard a Para junior come through the grades and gone, all we want to do is beat Penrith. It's always been the other way around. And even growing up as a kid, the big matches weren't against Penrith. They were against the Bulldogs, St. George and Manly. And why?
Yeah.
We played them all in grand finals. And we had different results. You know, Manly beat us in our first ever grand final. St. George beat us in 77. We all, I think, one each with the Bulldogs in the 80s. We beat Manly twice in the 80s. So you get that there's actually something to stitch them together. It's not just, oh, well, you know, we were the first Western Sydney club and then Penrith the second Western Sydney club. But yeah, I think now that we've played some big matches, this is our third finals match. I think prior to last year, we'd never met in the finals before. I don't think.
Yeah.
And now we're playing our third one basically in a row against each other. There's an actual rivalry here. There's something that can actually get passed on almost regardless of who wins on the weekend.
Yeah, it's just not a case of just pointing to them and saying, well, they're there. You know, there's actually something to it now. It's like Raiders fans that, you know, they've got a reason to not like the Panthers. They beat them in the last time they played in grand final, and, you know, we owned the Roosters' soul, obviously, from 2003. You know, and I guess there could have almost been a rivalry between the Panthers and Storm, but it was almost as though when Cameron Smith retired, it was like a new era for the Storm. So it wasn't like the same team. It was like the Storm now feel like they're different to what they were when leading up to that first grand final the Panthers played them in. So that rivalry kind of didn't go anywhere. But this one, I don't know, it just feels like it could be the start of something where it's like, finally we've got something everyone can say, remember that bloody grand final, you know, and fuck those guys.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know how old you were in 2009 when you last made the grand final. Was it 2000?
I was a teenager. Yeah,
okay.
I was a teenager. I was at high school.
So you were old enough to really take it all in.
Oh, definitely. I went to, I think, every home game that season.
Mm-hmm.
Probably, I think, plus a couple of away games. I went to the semi-final against the Titans and then the preliminary final against the Bulldogs. Couldn't get tickets to the grand final. My mum had booked us to go down to Canberra that weekend in the middle of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, she checked with Dad and I. She's like, well, how do you reckon Parramatta's going? And we were coming 12th or 13th. And we're like, oh, look, grand final weekend. Yeah, sure, let's go to Canberra. And then we got into the grand final and Dad and I looking at each other going, oh, we're in Canberra, aren't we? And we sat in our apartment there and watched the match from there, which was a bit, I know it was a bit, I was just Dad and myself and Mum. Mum likes the footy kind of to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
She lived with Dad and I long enough that it became part of her weekend. So she gets along to a couple of matches a year and, you know, follows the team. But it's not like Dad and I are nuts. There's if you meet us in public, we're two very logical human beings.
Mm-hmm.
But then a couple of lunatics that are psychotic get let loose from the asylum whenever Parramatta plays.
That's hilarious. It's funny when you have somebody that's close in your life that's not a footy tragic like you are, and you've kind of have to take that into account sometimes. And like you can see that they're happy for you, but they don't have that same like thing about, there's this team you go and watch and play them and stuff. It's like, no, it's more than that,
Yeah, it's a lot more than that. My wife has, since she's known me, has known how crazy I am. Our second date was actually at a Parramatta Bulldogs game. It was my way of testing if she was going to put up with me. Yes, we had our first date, which is, usual coffee date, get to know you. And then I had a spare ticket to the game. So I said, do you want to come to the footy? And she said yes. And then turned up for a third date. So I went, oh, I'm on here. She watched me lose it. I think it was 2016. So there was still Semi Radradra playing. I think we belted the Bulldogs that game. But, she got to see me in like full flight screaming at the referee, get him on side, just being absolutely nuts. And she's put up with it ever since. She kind of watched me almost in awe last week on the Friday night in the preliminary final. It's like, my husband is this very rational, normal human being, but I'm watching this, I'm watching him lose it over a game of football.
That's hilarious. I think the thing that I do is I stand up. I can't sit down. So I'll be watching it on TV and I'll start off and I'll, be in my seat. But then something happens and I'm up and I just don't sit back down and I'll sort of pace around in front of the TV. Sometimes I'll lean against the back of the couch just looking at the floor. And that's my crazy thing that I do while I'm watching at home. I don't know what I do when I'm at the football because I'm so wrapped up in it. But I remember when I was a teenager once and it was at a Parramatta game because my friends all went for Parramatta because they're all from sort of more Blacktown than Penrith way. And so I remember going to a Parramatta game when I was a teenager and one of my friends kept on looking at me and I'm like, what are you looking at? And he's like, I'm waiting for you to start ranting about the trainers. And I'm like, I don't rant about the trainers. And all my other friends just started laughing and they're like, dude, you go off about the trainers every time you hear. And I was like, oh, shit, I didn't even know I was doing it.
Yeah, I wouldn't know what I do at games because Dad and I go to basically every game. We've been season ticket holders since, I think, 2006. So hundreds of games that we've been to. But at home, on Friday night, I was walking around the family room. I think I went to the toilet when Moses was lining up the kick at the penalty goal. I can't watch. I'm like, seriously, I just can't watch it. My wife's like, the game's on. I can't watch it. I had a feeling he was going to miss it. So I'm going to the toilet. She's like, yeah, he's missed it. And I'm like, did it go dead? She's like, what do you mean? Like, did it go dead? That's what I want to know. Did it go dead?
That's hilarious. That's brilliant.
I think by the end of the game, I was standing like barely half a meter from the TV.
Oh,
just
really?
Like screaming, it's like, tackle him, fucking tackle him. Just don't let Holmes run, just tackle him. Don't let Townsend run, don't let Dearden run, just tackle him.
Oh,
and I saw the pass go to ground. I was like, just fall on it. I think by the end of it, I think I was on my knees by the end of the game when Bailey Simonson came up with the ball, and I was like, it doesn't matter what happens here. If the referee rules that it's our knock on, the game's over. If he rules it's their knock on, the game's over. We've won. We're going to the grand final.
Yeah.
I think by the end of it, I was crying.
Did you cry?
Yeah, I did. I didn't cry at my wedding. I've got two kids that didn't cry at their birth, but I cried when Parramatta made a grand final.
That's interesting because I remember, was it last year? Yeah, last year in our finals run, and it was the game we beat the Melbourne Storm in. So it wasn't even the preliminary final. And my dog Mason had passed away it was a couple of weeks earlier, I think, or maybe a week and a half earlier. And I watched that game. And when we won that game, I was on my knees bawling my eyes out. And I was like, I needed that game. And it's interesting, the ones that'll get you. It might not, if you win the grand final, you might not cry during the grand final, but for whatever reason, just getting there and being like, we're finally here, that's the one that gets you. It's funny.
Yeah.
I didn't cry during last year's grand final at all. I didn't even come close. But for whatever reason, that Melbourne game, I bawled like a little kid.
I think I might. It is Dad and I going. We're going to Combank. We couldn't get grand final tickets together. So we decided, look, we can sit together at Combank Stadium where they're going to have the big screen set up and be able to watch it together there. Because it'd be the first, if we win, it'd be the first premiership I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And not just that, I've kind of been to this before because I'm a Liverpool fan, and we broke a 30-year drought a couple of years ago. And I pretty much sat in the lounge crying like before I went to work because we won it midweek because the English system, because of its first past the post. Chelsea beat Man City, which meant we had the title. But yeah, it was a different feeling. It was just myself. My dad follows the Premier League, but not to the level I do, in that my Liverpool support's almost as strong as my Parramatta support. I'll get up at really random hours to watch whenever we're playing, and do that. I think last season we played 64 games, so I did that a lot. And yeah, to win the premiership on Sunday, I think I will be crying. I think a big part of it too is because my grandfather passed away 3 years ago, so I never got that with him. I never got to celebrate a premiership with him. And he's the one who gave me all the tapes from the 80s. He taped every grand final Parramatta played in, but he only gave me the ones that we won. So 81 to 83 and 86. So I watched them as a kid when I was, off sick or something. And yeah, to be able to have that now that I've got kids, to be able to see us win a premiership with my dad would be amazing. Not that my kids really understand what's happening. One's 3 and the other's nearly 5 months old. So it'll be something I tell them about, but not something they're probably going to remember.
Yeah.
My son knows about Parramatta, and he's got a little Parramatta flag that he runs around the house with, but he's got no real, interest yet in actually following and watching the sport.
Yeah. As long as he has the colours and he's got the logo that he's looking at, you just don't want them to have a choice.
Yeah, I haven't given him a choice. He's had Eels jerseys since the day he was born. All my family bought him Eels onesies. Even the people I worked with at the time, they made sure he had all the Parramatta gear he could ever need as a baby. And then, my youngest has now got a lot of that as well because we just passed it down. So I'm hoping that if he does decide he's going to follow rugby league, I hope it's Parramatta. I don't know how I'd take it if you decide to follow another club. I think I'd cope very, very well.
Yeah, well, like Andrew's daughter decided she wanted to be a Panthers fan, but he was kind of happy that she wasn't following his West Tigers. She was like, I don't want that for us. So it worked out all right there. But yeah, it'd be, if he decided to be a Bulldogs fan or something, it'd be like, oh man.
Oh, he's out on the street if he does that.
Oh, that's hilarious. Now, I reckon there's actually going to be a pretty big crowd there at Combank Stadium. It sounded like that they were gearing up for a pretty big event there.
Yeah.
So there should be a really, really good atmosphere there. Do you know how they're going to set it all up? Because
they've got 2 live sites out there. So one is at Combank Stadium, so inside the ground, which is the tickets we've got. They're going to have some big screens set up there, and they're selling tickets in the Eastern Grandstand. So I believe that is the Ken Thornett. I think it's the Ken Thornett side, which is where my season tickets are anyway, so that's fine by me. And then the Leagues Club is having a live site in the car park with the big screen set up. And you can, they've got a bunch of different packages to purchase through the Leagues Club. But only Leagues Club members can get that. So you need to be, we've got the 2 memberships at Parramatta. So you're either a football club member, which, gets you to the games, or you're a Leagues Club member, or you can have both. I've got both. But yeah, they're going to have the 2 live sites. So you're probably going to get, I reckon, 15,000 there across the 2 live sites. I think the Eastern Grandstand sits about 10,000 people or something, and it wouldn't surprise me if they sold that out.
Yeah, it'll be. If you win, it's going to be absolutely awesome, and if you lose, it's going to be, man, it's going to be a rough time to leave the stadium. Everyone's going to be like, it's not like a normal footy game where you've got like other supporters and stuff. It's just going to be Parramatta supporters, so it's going to be one way or the other.
Yeah, it's either going to be manic or it's going to be depressed. And, I mean, if they win the I don't know what you're going to do with the traffic around the Leagues Club. When they won in 81, they couldn't even get the team bus to the Leagues Club.
Yeah,
it was that packed, and I think you'd have the same problem here. I don't know what you'd be able to do. to try and clear Parramatta fans off the street of O'Connell Street if they won the comp on Sunday. It'd be a very cathartic thing, I think, for a lot of fans. You saw the guy who would have been on TV on Friday night, who was just lost it after the win. The guy with the Kramer hair. And they did a story with him, I think, on Sunday, on Monday, and he's got the Eels suit, and he was all of us. That was the thing, is this one guy, but he actually represented so many of us in that one shot, how we felt. And I think it's been more of that if they went on Sunday.
Yeah, look, I haven't thought about it until listening to you now. In a way, I mean, I guess you could say a couple of generations almost of Parramatta supporters, this would be your first grand final. I never thought of that, hey? Because I guess as a Panthers fan, we had 91 and then like 2003 and then we had the one last year. So it's been kind of consistent every decade, you know? So there's the generations of Panthers fans have kind of seen it at some point, unless you're like a young kid or something, and then it's a bit different, I think, when you're a young kid. But yeah, it's been long enough for Parramatta fans that there's plenty of years that are just like, man, I've never had one, I've never felt it, I want to know what it's like. So that's kind of cool when you think of it like that.
Yeah, I've been getting a lot of that from Parramatta fans. The podcast I've been listening to has been almost all Parramatta all week, whether it's the guys at the Cumberland Throw or elsewhere. And I know one of the guys at the Cumberland Throw 60s, as his moniker intimates, he's child of the 60s, so he watched the 80s, and I've spoken to him about it. You know, he watched all that, and then he's been through all the crap after that too. And you know, he's described being, you know, seeing the 81 grand final and the breaking of the drought. And he said he'd probably, you know, if they win this year, it'd be probably very similar to that. In that, I think it was 34 years from inception to 81. That was the break between premiership wins. And then a lot of people my age and even older than me, because I'm in my late 20s, you know, we've never seen the premiership, but we watched 2001, we watched 2009. And 2001 was painful and heartbreaking.
Oh, that was right. Yeah.
2009 was different. A lot of the fans I've spoken to have been, it was a nice ride, and it didn't work out in the end, but you couldn't really be upset because you didn't expect to be there at all. You know, it's easy to say, oh, well, you got there, you should have expected to win, but the other hand is you weren't even supposed to be there. So sit back and enjoy the ride, and whatever happens, happens. And I think the big thing this time around is this is our fourth consecutive final series. We finished top four, and it's kind of, it feels like it's now or never, really.
Yeah, it does feel like that. And because you've got like a few key players leaving, it kind of does feel like this is the peak of what this group has in it. And next year there might be a little bit of a step back. That's not to say that they won't build back up again or that they might not win it again next year. But like, if you had to put your money on it, this is the peak year for what Parramatta can do, where all of the experience and the having lost, having got close, having thought they were good and it just didn't work out, and they're here now, and it's like, don't waste it, you know?
Yep. Don't drop this opportunity to do it. And I think the good thing is throughout this final series, they've been tested, and probably the more interesting thing is the past 2 years, Parramatta, this side, has had to break a lot of hoodoos and a lot of droughts. I'm not an overly superstitious person, but I think there is something when an opponent gets something over you and you can't break it, and something happens when you finally do, like beating Melbourne in Melbourne. We've done that. We beat Canberra in Canberra. We beat Newcastle in Newcastle. We beat Penrith in Penrith. We finally managed to beat the Roosters in a game, which we did last year, but that was in very controversial circumstances. Like that was the Dylan Brown on Drew Hutchison thing, and whereas this year we literally took the Roosters into like the deep end and then beat them the way the old Roosters would have beaten sides. We played across the 80 minutes and ground them into the dirt and finished over the top of them. And then come finals, lost first week, and everyone was like, well, this, the Parramatta's the favourites in the second week. They should beat Canberra, but you know how Parramatta goes in favouritism. It doesn't always work out. And to come out and put on that performance was just breathtaking. I didn't expect that at all. I thought Canberra would really trouble us, particularly early on. They'd come out, they'd be physical, they'd be fast. They'd pull at our edges and see what would happen. And I didn't think... The thing that's really surprised me this final series has been our defence, actually. A lot of time and air has been given to our attack, which has been pretty outstanding too. But the change in defensive structures and ability to limit teams giving in terms of opportunities, and then also limit the amount of points being scored. Like even that Cowboys game, the Cowboys I think had, by the end of the night, had I think 4 or 5 total sets of 6 on our line, and they'd come away with 20 points.
Yeah,
3 tries and a penalty goal. But when you look at that, that's outstanding levels of defense. The amount of tackles you've had to withstand, and particularly the finish to that game where the Cowboys just came in hot and they threw the kitchen sink at us. And I was speaking to Dad at halftime, and what was the halftime score? It was 12-all, wasn't it?
Honestly, I can't remember.
I can't remember now either. I think it might have been 14-12. I think that Valentine Holmes might have kicked that penalty goal right on halftime. But I remember saying
the thing for that game that got me was like the Cowboys had their chance and they didn't get it done. And that's what this part of the year is all about. It's like if you get your chance, you've got to get it done. And that was what was so crazy about the South versus Panthers game the next day, was that South had a 12-point lead and they were in the box seat. Penrith wasn't even playing that well at all.
And they're smothering Penrith.
Going and it's even, and it's like, man, that was their chance, When
Tolo scored that try, I just went, Souths are cooked.
Yeah.
They had all the momentum, and then that try, it wasn't through Penrith getting back into the game. It wasn't through Penrith starting to get on top. It was literally another intercept, a dropped ball collected, and he took off for 80 metres and scored. And that is so, I think that's more deflating for a side than when you've absorbed some pressure on your line and then concede a try, because you go, well, that's just part of the momentum of the game, how it swings and changes. But when you are on top and you hand the other side 6 points, that can destroy you. And it did in the end to South. They didn't come back from that. I think the really interesting thing is both Parramatta and Penrith had to come from behind in their preliminary finals. Penrith ended up doing it a little more comfortably, but I think they were under a lot more scoreboard pressure than Parramatta ever was. I think you guys were down 12-0. The biggest gap we had was 8 points. And both sides had to find a way to get themselves back into the game, and then ensure that they kept the other side out of it for as long as they could. And like I said, Penrith kicked away by the end of the match, and Parramatta had to kind of hang on by the skin of their teeth against the Cowboys. So both sides ended up getting it done in the end.
Yeah, and it's like you don't know until it all plays out. We won't know until full time on Sunday, but you wonder how the journey affects the destination. And I always wonder about when you play an opponent in the first week, like we've seen Parramatta and Penrith play, and one team wins, and then that team goes on and that team goes off, and then the other team has to go on a long, hard journey to get back and play that opponent again. And
well, that happened to you guys last year, didn't it?
Who did we play? Yeah, it did. Yeah. And like how do you back up? Like I tend to think that the team that lost the first game, and I said this with the Roosters versus South match in the last round, I tend to go for the team that lost when they back up again, because there's something that you can look at and say, that's what we did wrong, and you're also pissed off that you lost that game as well. There's something about that.
The Parramatta players and coaching staff have been talking about that first week a little bit. They've obviously been asked about it. And they've all said, we didn't play Parramatta football. We tried to beat Penrith at their own game. We're changing that for the grand final. We're going to play the way we want to play. I think that's right. You're not going to beat Penrith trying to play like Penrith. It's like trying to beat Melbourne when they're playing like Melbourne in the 2010s. You know what I mean? Every side went, you You work out your sets, you kick long, you chase hard, and you dominate the ruck. And it's like, well, that's good until you play Melbourne, who are the best at it.
Yeah.
And then you're like playing with one hand tied behind your back. And both times Parramatta beat Penrith this season, it was playing Parramatta football.
Mm-hmm.
It was promoting the ball. It was looking for the offloads. It was generating second phase play. It was being physical in defence, but it wasn't trying to, you've got to stay alive to the 80th minute. But Parramatta plays the best when they are trying to score points, not when they're trying to protect the lead or not when they're just trying to stay in an arm wrestle.
Yeah,
they can stay in the arm wrestle.
No one's grinding the Panthers out. Like they're kind of psychotic in that way. You can't grind them out. You've got to try and kick their ass is the only way to do it. Because just go grind it through your sets is just playing their game, playing into their hands.
You almost have to look a little bit how Queensland have played New South Wales in the past few years. And when the matches have been more even, right? So it's not like those Latrell Mitchell and Tom Trbojevic blowouts. When that match has been in the balance, if Queensland have got ahead, they haven't really given up the lead that much. They've put the onus on Nathan Cleary to try and create points. And don't get me wrong, Nathan Cleary is a great halfback, but you wouldn't say he's one of the best at creating points when he's behind on the scoreboard. Because he relies, and Penrith rely, on grinding a team out, right? Kicking long, chasing hard, trying to play it down the other end of the field. Now, if you're behind on the scoreboard, eventually that scoreboard pressure starts to tell. Like you start looking for that little bit of an extra pass. You start looking for that bit extra on your kick, and before you know it, that kick's run dead, that pass has gone forward, or it's bounced off your support runner because they have mistimed their run. They're not expecting the ball to be thrown as hard. I think you saw a little bit of that in the first game that we played earlier in the year at Penrith Park, where Parramatta, I think, came from behind to end up winning that, even though Penrith came late. There was scoreboard pressure on Penrith as that game grew on, and I think they started to make a few more mistakes, and they looked less and less Penrithy as the game went on because they were chasing the game.
Well, Penrith's attack can look so clunk, and I've said this all year, and it's weird to say because they won 20 games, but their attack can look really bloody clunky, you know? And the way they put points on you is that you get to the 60th minute and you're stuffed because they've been smashing you for 60 minutes, you know? As you say, it's not like they're a team that has this ridiculous attacking flair about them. It's all very much like
system.
You feel like you're dying, and then they're running over the top of you.
Well, if you watch, and I think I read this by Jason Oliver at Rugby League Writers, and he was saying that Parramatta withstood a lot of attack from the Cowboys and only needed 7 tackles or something in the Cowboys' 20 to score 4 tries. And it was like Penrith actually have one of the lower conversion rates, I think, for tackles in the opponent's 20 and then points scored. I think they sit around 8th or something. And I think Parramatta sit 3rd. And so it's like Penrith look, like you said, to try and grind you out of the game, exhaust you, and then exploit the tired defenders on the inside by targeting your edges. And so Parramatta's going to be very aware to try and stay. Because Penrith, I think they've got the best possession rate in the competition at 53% or something. And Parramatta's second at 52%. So that's an interesting matchup because obviously you can't really get that split. You know, you might get a 50-50 split in the grand final. So it could also come down to who's better in the 20-metre zone because you might not get as many attempts as you normally would during the season against other opposition. So who can ice that moment when the game's there to be won, or who's going to surge ahead early and put the other team under pressure. And the funny thing is Parramatta's gone away from being that early 20-minute blitz. They had that for the past few years. Like they come out of the blocks flying, put you to the sword early, and then play from in front. And the longer this season's gone on, sometimes they concede the first try, sometimes they score the first try, but it almost doesn't matter to them. It's like if they score the first try, they might go on with it a bit more, but they seem a lot more measured. They don't try and overplay their hand, whereas previously they did.
Yeah, I wonder how that'll play out in the grand final because my feeling is that for the Eels to win, they've got to get off to a good start. If Penrith score the first points, like if they score the first try, not the first point so much, but the first try, I feel like that's probably a bad sign just because it'll allow the Panthers then to play the grind.
Yeah,
game, you know?
It'll allow them to get into their rhythm.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it kind of plays into what you were saying before. You want to have the Panthers under pressure, and it was weird because last week when they played South, they were down 12-0, and they weren't playing well, but it felt like they were still a little bit comfortable. But if South had just got like a penalty goal or something, just to get that extra little bit of pressure on, it might have been enough to get Penrith going to that game plan where you got to throw it around, you got to make mistakes, and then all of a sudden you're breaking down their percentages.
I think they needed to go into halftime with the lead, not level, because it's that whole mental thing, right? That you had the lead and you lost it. And for Penrith, it's like we played a shocking first half, but the scores are even.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a bit same with the Parramatta Cowboys game too. We had a shocking first half as well. We completed at like 55 or 60%. It's pathetic, but we were so in the game at half time. And the Cowboys are like, we had all that possession, all that field position, and how the hell is it still even?
Yeah. There was a point there where I was watching the Cowboys and I'm like, I think that they've got Parramatta here.
I thought they did with Taulungi's try. I thought they had us.
Yeah, and I'm like, is this where? And this is where the teams are on this journey to become a champion. Where it's like, this is where we're going to see if they're gonna go, oh, this is too difficult, or they're going to go, everything's cool, let's just get back into it. And they got back into it.
Yeah.
And
Moses did his job. There's a lot of focus on the 2 kicks he put out in the full in the first half, but the second half he did his job, and it was just the left edge of Dylan Brown and Sean Lane.
Mm-hmm.
Brown's ability to just isolate Lane onto a smaller guy, which I think is going to be a big part of Parramatta's attack this weekend.
Yeah,
is utilising Sean Lane to get it clear. Now, Cleary is probably the second best halves defender in the competition. I'd rate Brown number 1. Brown's physicality is a bit better, and he's almost like this guy you actually can't beat one-on-one. If you watch him, he'll stand up a back row and stick to him like glue. But I think the way Parramatta will attack is asking Cleary, yeah, you're a good defender, but you can't tackle Sean Lane up top. That's going to be what they're going to try and do.
To handle with that height that he's got. Like,
he's so awkward. He's like a massive giraffe.
Yeah, it's like spider arms or something. It's ridiculous. Yeah. I've never focused on Brown as a defensive player. I'll have to watch that. Hey,
watch him because I think his tackle efficiency is well over 90%. I think it might be 95% or something. The guy makes a lot of tackles.
Yeah.
And his reading of the game is exceptional as well for a half. He knows when to come up. He knows when to stay out. And it's a reason that Parramatta's left edge defense is actually quite hard to pick apart. That's the side the Cowboys tried to score against late, using Kyle Felt, and the left edge worked the way it should. They held, they slid, and Sivo got to him in enough time to put him into touch. And they did that a fair few times in the last 2 months of the season, daring teams to go around them rather than allowing them to go around them. That up and in defense seems to have gone. For the most part, there's going to be the odd misread, I'd imagine, but the slide defense has been very effective. It's the same way Penrith defend as well. They hold and slide, and they wait for you to make a mistake. Like, you try and beat them on the outside, they'll show you the touchline and put you over it.
Yeah,
and I think that's the way you have to defend these days. I kind of actually like that a bit in terms of attacking wise as well. Parramatta like change of angles. They like sending Lane or Papali'i back on the inside, keeping the inside defenders honest, making them make sure they get across to make their tackles. And we've spoken about Sean Lane and his ability to promote the football in contact. But Papali'i's also got that ability to just burrow his way through a single defender.
Yeah.
He's obviously very difficult to tackle one-on-one, kind of regardless of your size. He tends to get down and just drive with his legs, and you can lock the ball up, but he'll take another 10 metres off you if you don't take him down by his legs.
He's like an upsized To'o.
Yeah.
He's got that leg drive, and you can get a good hit on him. He can hit a flat line, and sometimes it just doesn't matter.
Yeah, he's also made a habit of scoring from dummy half. He just gets so low and just powers through the first contact close to the line, and you can't hold him up.
Did you see the interview he did at the Dally M's where they said blink if you're going to the West Tigers, and kept his eyes wide open? That was the funniest shit. Like, I know West Tigers fans would be so upset about it, But fucking hell, it was so funny. It was so good. And he did it so purposefully too. He ain't going to the West Tigers.
Yeah, I think he's really regretting that decision now. You watch the West Tigers shit show that was this season, and they've come last, and now you're in the grand final, and you're going, oh, that was the worst mistake in my career.
And I can see making it too, because when he signed when Maguire was still there, and they were kind of working towards something, and he signs, and then the club just explodes into a mess, and he must have been like, I don't know how much extra they were paying him to go there, but I think he's ready to burn it right now.
Yeah, that'd be nice if he stays.
Yeah, I think it'd be great for his career if he stayed. I always think that if you're a player like him that was in a situation where he was at the Warriors, and it kind of like, he wasn't a first grader that really stood out in any way, and then he goes to Parramatta, and for whatever reason, everything just works for him. He's in the right environment. He starts playing well. He's got the right teammates around him. Just stay there. Like, it's not worth the extra money to take yourself out of that environment,
Yeah, you should. You see some players do that. They say, I'm here, I'm playing well. Why would I leave? I get there's a money point too, but I also think, you got to look at your career and go, okay, if I stay at this club for another 3 seasons, my career itself is going to be a lot better. I'm going to be worth more for longer. Whereas if he struggles at the Tigers, he might have a good initial contract with them, but he may be fighting for a new contract after that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
We probably should get back to talking about this weekend, not the Tigers contract situation the next season.
Seriously, our podcast always descends into Tigers bashing, and it just happens.
Yeah.
I think because everyone that comes on is just like, I can't believe the West Tigers, man. Fuck. I think you and me agree with a lot of how this game has to go for Parramatta to win it. And the thing that I've been saying all week is that, like, this Panthers team they've ticked every box you could ask them to tick, right? And if they're now in a place where they can become one of the 3 teams that have won back-to-back titles in the modern era, the 10-metre era, because I don't count the Broncos one when they won Super League. Fuck them. But then because they're also a young side too, they've got the opportunity to beat, we could be talking about a similar sort of lineup for the Panthers in 4 years from now, which is kind of crazy because they're all still young enough to do that. They've got the Panthers have the opportunity to become possibly a great side, and if this Parramatta team can beat this great Panthers team, well, damn it, they're a great champion in their own right, and there's nothing you can take away from them. And that's the way I'm looking at this grand final, is that it's one way or the other. We're going to end up with a team that we can say, oh man, where does this team rate against the modern great teams we've seen? Or this team just beat possibly one of the great modern great teams, It's so cool in that sense.
One of the things I'm holding on to is that Penrith are so good that it has been so difficult to go back-to-back.
Yeah.
How much of the salary cap were Melbourne? They never managed it. They went to 4 consecutive grand finals. They never managed to go back-to-back.
Yeah, like the only one we've seen in recent times is the Roosters.
And
then then you're going back if you don't take the Super League Super League title in '97, which I don't. I know plenty of people do, but I don't.
Yeah.
And then you're back to the bloody Broncos in '92, '93. And you think of all of the great players the Broncos had in '92, '93, and they weren't in it in '94. Like, they were a good team, but they weren't in the grand final in '94. So it's bloody hard just to have got to where the Panthers are now. And yeah, you got to wonder, does that wear them down? Now, one of the things I've thought is that maybe with all of the rest that their players have had leading up to this week's game, where they had the week off after week 1 of the finals, then they had players that were suspended and injuries and all that sort of stuff, whether that will cancel some of that sort of grind out. The other thing is them being young as well. Like, normally teams that get to this point, 3 straight grand finals even, they're veteran teams.
I'm interested
if their age and all of the rest they've had will cancel that out, and we will find out. That's the best part about it.
I'm interested to see the mental application, because you can understand Penrith last year, right? The year before, they get blown out of the water by Melbourne in the first half.
Yeah.
Like, Penrith played decent football, but Melbourne have been there before then. And Cameron Smith's just like, this is how you play a grand final, kids. I'll show you how.
100%.
You know, and then last year, they get into that big arm wrestle with Souths, and they're going pound for pound for about 60 minutes until Stephen Crichton intercepts Cody Walker's pass to surge Penrith ahead. And you go, so last year, Penrith's driven by losing the previous year. They've learned a lot of lessons. And then this season, they are the hunted. They're not the hunters anymore. They're not the ones out to avenge the previous season. They're there to stake their claim to remain on top. And then you've got Parramatta who are going, well, we could be the team to break the 36-year drought. And I know that basically all the chat within the side is nothing about that history, because you can get weighed down by it and you can overthink it. And I think that happened to the side in 2001. I think there's too much focus on being that next great side rather than just winning, you know. And I think it showed in the preliminary final that Parramatta was ready to go this week almost immediately. They had the interviews with Junior Barlow after, and the first thing he said was, job's not done. We've got one more game to go. And the same from Sean Lane. I think there's a lot more focus there, that they're not getting ahead of themselves, which you can't in a grand final. The other interesting thing is, I spoke to Steve Edge a couple of years ago, and he was a serial winner during his career. He won 2 comps with St George, 3 with Parramatta.
People these days probably don't know that he was like a Cameron Smith guy. He was like a winner, and that's what they got him there for.
He played 4 consecutive grand finals at the end of his career, and he won 3 of them. And I remember asking, like, how did you manage that? Like, you've won 2 in a row. How do you win the 3rd? And he was just like, well, we had a side that didn't know how to lose, and we weren't going to lose. And he said Ray Price was a big driver of that. He said Ray just refused to lose those games. And you saw that in 86. Ray Price was there, and Parramatta didn't lose. And Edge was saying, you know, I came to Parramatta to win premierships, and having had that experience with St George, I knew how to win a grand final. But you know, part of that was Jack Gibson as well. You know, he'd already won 2 when he came to Parramatta, and it was that experience they had of just refusing to lose, and knowing that, you know, they were the better side on the day, having that confidence and that belief in themselves that they were the better side on the day to get the job done. So that's going to be the interesting. You know, Parramatta's driven by that want. You know, for a lot of them, it's Reid Marnie said it's our last dance. There's half a dozen guys leaving that have been the nucleus of this side for the past 3 or 4 years. It's their last chance together to win a premiership. And then the other side of the coin is Penrith are probably driven by a bit of history too. To be the only the second side in the past 20 years to have gone back to back and really drive home how good of a side they are. Because I think this might be a side that we don't recognise as truly great until, you know, a decade's time when they're starting to retire. And, you know, people start looking around and Cleary's 33 or something and right at the end of his career, and same for To'o and Luai, and then they're starting to look back going, these guys were part of an unbelievable Penrith era. And it's interesting to see how they're going to, as you said, they're young, that none of their guys have actually, it's unlike Melbourne in that none of their guys have been through this before in terms of defending the title. They've won it. They know how to win it. Now they've got to defend it.
Yeah, and it's very different defending it. You know, I always felt like last year when they come into the grand final and they slayed a couple of dragons on the way. You know, that beating Melbourne was massive, because then they were like, okay, we know we can finally beat the Storm, right? And then they get into the grand final eventually, and they're coming up against a team that beat them a few weeks earlier. And I always felt going into that game that if they had lost that game and they'd lost back-to-back grand finals, it would have been mentally devastating to them. And I think that if they had lost that game, this season would have turned out very different for them. I think they still would have been a very good team. but I don't think they would have won 20 games, for instance.
No.
I think that it took a lot of pressure off them that they've all got premiership rings now. But how does that affect them? You know?
Yeah, how does that affect them late in the game if they've got to try and play from behind? I asked Steve Edge that. I said, did you ever get to a point in a game where you're kind of like, I've won a premiership here, you know? And I think as the second 82, they needed to fight back against Manly, I believe, to come from behind. You know, was there ever any thought there of I've already won a comp? It doesn't really matter. And he was like, no. We had the opportunity to win another one, so we wanted to win another one.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's going to be that much. But yeah, it's how much subconsciously does last year's premiership. And they're not a team that lacks confidence, you know, in their ability.
And they know that this team is pretty much set to be together. Like, this isn't their last go at it. They're not 30-year-olds that are like, I played a whole career. Like, they've got another bloody 10 years, some of them ahead of them. That they know that they're going to be together, and they know they're going to be a pretty bloody good football team. And you don't know until they run out there on Sunday how that all of that plays into it. And I think it all does. I think that obviously there are some players that they can block all of that stuff out. They don't care about it, to be honest. But then there are other players that the pressure does weigh on them. Their past weighs on them, and we see that. We see that in some players' performances, and sometimes it breaks players, and other times it makes them stand taller than everyone else on the field. And that's what I love about the finals in rugby league, is that it's not so much just about watching a sport. It's like watching a human experience played out physically, because you see a Jordan Rapana where it's like, oh my God, this guy can't go near the ball without it being a disaster, you know?
You see some players get inside their own heads a bit too much.
Yeah, like everyone knows who Paul Carriage is. And if he didn't have the Paul Carriage game, we wouldn't know who Paul Carriage was, really. But the Parramatta fans would be like, oh, yeah, it's a pretty good fullback, you know, not too bad.
Yeah, not too bad, yeah.
But he is a legend in the game for a reason.
Infamous legend.
Yeah, and so it's you never know. You just never know. Everyone knows who Darren Albert is for a different reason.
You know? Exactly.
It's so cool. We've got such a cool game that you can win physically in so many different ways, but then also it plays out mentally. It's great.
I think the first 5 minutes you'll see what. I mean, I'm pretty confident Parramatta will turn up, but you'll see what version of that good Parramatta turns up. How physically intense they'll be in the middle. 2 months ago, and I watched us play against the Bulldogs, and I was worried about that game because they'd beaten us earlier pretty convincingly in the season. I was like, are they going to make this difficult?
Bulldogs in that one, hey?
Sorry?
I tipped the Bulldogs in that one because I was worried about that one for you a lot too.
And they came out and just blew them off the park. And I was in the press conference after, and I asked Brad, you know, you played Murata to start, and you dropped Maddo to the bench, then you played Maddo and Cartwright together in the middle. Like, what was the plan behind that? And he said, well, we wanted to go at them through the middle, and Murata is probably one of our most physical middles. So that's the message we were sending. We were sending him out there to basically just bully them. And that's what they did. You know, by the time Maddo and Cartwright came on, he said, look, we had them beat through the middle. We knew we had them covered, and we're just going out there to drive that advantage, showing you some fast feet, fast ball movement, put the pressure on them, and they cracked. And he's kept that formula ever since because it works. You know, you've seen Murata on your Corday run. He's not the biggest guy out there, but he's one of those players. Fu is the same. He challenges the defense to stop him. He's not stopping himself. You're going to have to physically get in his way and stop him. And there's something about that. It's such a gladiatorial sport in that his job is literally go and get bashed.
Yeah.
And he tries to bash his opponent with and without the ball as well. The real thing I like is Nathan Brown on the bench. I actually thought he would have got selected a couple of weeks ago when he was available. So there's been a bit of a talk about a rift between him and Brad, and they both said it's bullshit. And I mean, part of the reason
4K around, like, you know, a few weeks ago where they said there was that report that Nathan Brown, the coach, was doing, which said people in the club were upset about nepotism. And I thought that was weird because that was leaked out of the club itself.
Yeah,
I thought that was very strange. Like, it's weird how there's a bit of chatter around the club.
the
But it's
best,
Parramatta, isn't it? It's like they're always...
They're always in the news. But the best explanation I got was like they're talking about junior football and they're talking about, uncles and dads picking people that they know. And I think it might have been one of the guys on the Fifth and Last podcast who coached, I think, New South Wales Cup level. And they're like, mate, that happens at every club.
We said the same thing. Like, nepotism in rugby league, like, hello, that's rugby league. You
had Zach Fulton debuting for Manly earlier this year. If he's not a Fulton, is he playing?
Exactly.
Is he playing for Manly?
It's so silly. It's so silly. That's why, like, when that report came out, I was like, this is fucking ridiculous.
I'm not surprised that happens at all. I mean, let's be honest here. And I think it happens almost in every sport as well.
Yeah.
Any sport that has a junior catchment where the coaches are essentially parents who have volunteered, they are going to select kids that they are familiar with. Whether it's their own kid or players that are in their kid's team or more distant relatives, they're going to give them a crack at some point because, someone's going to be in their ear going, can you give my son Billy a shot, basically. I don't think it was, as Brad said, they weren't even paying attention to it and they didn't give it any airtime. The Nathan Brown thing is interesting in that, he's a big chunk of the reason he hasn't played recently is he broke his hand. He was out for like 5 weeks. And then he played the last round in Cup, New South Wales Cup for Parramatta. But his Cup numbers were like what you'd expect from a first grader, 150 average running meters, 95% tackle efficiency, getting through the work that he'd be tasked to do. And he was starting. He was playing, I think, an average of 60 minutes or something a game. And I like the fact that he's on the bench because my biggest criticism of Brad all season has been an inability to drive home any advantage from the bench players or keep the energy up in defence. And Nathan Brown does that. He's like an unhinged psycho when he comes off the bench. And he's not going to be asked to play big minutes, which was a bit of a problem for him at the start of the year. He played out last year with a torn syndesmosis, and he got surgery over the off season. So his off season was cut short, which is why he was a bit, fresh at the start of the year. He wasn't playing big minutes, and then the form Nikorte and Madison have been, it's been very hard to justify playing Nathan Brown when those two locks have been in fantastic form.
Yeah.
But the comment around you dropped Bryce Cartwright for Nathan Brown. I'm like, I'm sorry, but Carty is great when you want to use the football, but only in small doses. And he doesn't bring the defensive aggression that Nathan Brown brings. And I think for a grand final, you're looking to a guy who's going to come up off the line, put a shot on, or he's just going to keep that middle forward rotation going. He's going to keep that intensity coming through the middle, and inflicting a bit of that intimidation factor once Regan Campbell-Gillard goes off. All the focus last week ended up being on Dylan Brown and Sean Lane. Regan Campbell-Gillard's second stint was close to winning us the match as well. He scored a double in that game, but his physicality in defence was immense. He came out and he hunted down the Cowboys' middles and then ran the ball as hard as he could as well to try and get us going forward and getting us moving up the park. There were a couple of times we weren't doing so well coming out of our own end, and Regan would just wind up off the back fence and take a 15-metre run and just get things going again. He seems to have really come into his best form at the back end of this season. He's been good for the past couple of years, but he seems to have really reached up levels.
The last 6 weeks in particular, he's gone to his best football, which it's been. He would float in and out of that, and you sometimes you'd be like, man, is this what's happened with him? But he's got it on. He's got it on at the right time too. With Cartwright, Penrith to handle Cartwright all day. Like he runs cross field. Like have it run to the sideline, fine. And so I think that just the system change that they will have to their bench is a good thing for them. The only thing that worries me about Brown is that he can go too far sometimes, and I just worry that they're bringing him in for the grand final, and I just hope that they're not they're not doing the thing that used to happen to Adrian Morley sometimes, where it's like, go out there and smash them, and he'd be like, yeah, and he'd go out and give away penalties and stuff, and then wonder why everyone's upset at him because he did what they asked him to do.
Yeah.
It's to play measured.
Yeah. I think he's become a lot more measured since he's been at Parramatta. He's not as much of a loose cannon as he used to be when he was at Souths. The other thing is he's being asked to probably come off and play 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And he's not being asked to start, and I think that might take a bit of the gas out of him, like in terms of if he was starting, I'd be a bit more worried that he's going to try and lay someone out in the first minute.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if he's coming on, he's kind of got to just come on and just do his job.
Yeah.
And the other thing I like too is that he's got an offload in him and he's got a passing game at the line. And that's the type of thing that Penrith don't like. You watch the way Penrith play, you watch the way Parramatta plays. Penrith play this very kind of, I'd almost call it pass-first football, in that they look to shift before contact. They don't like shifting in contact.
Yeah.
They like to, even when Cleary goes to the line, it's almost like he's trying to get his player to get that ball well before he's at the line. Because Penrith like to promote the football almost sideways, but do it when they've got middle dominance.
Yeah.
And they do it with Isa Yeo. Isa Yeo, Nathan's referred to him as his other halfback, basically, because Isa plays in the middle and distributes the ball to the halves, and it allows Cleary to attack that third out defender, that C defender, and make them make decisions, make them make mistakes, and move the ball on faster. I was looking at the stats from Parramatta's 2 wins against Penrith this year. Now, Yeo averages 21 general play passes a game, and in those 2 matches, he managed 17 and 16. So Parramatta kept into almost a full set of distributing the ball short of his average.
Yeah.
And when they lost to Penrith in the first week of the finals, there were other factors. Mitchell Moses going off concussed, one of them. But Yeo was able to pass the ball 22 times.
Yeah.
So he got another full set to move the ball for Penrith. And a lot of that comes back to how well you start your sets. So if Penrith get on a roll, Yeo gets space to ball play, and he can shift it when he wants to. If they don't have the middle dominance, Penrith don't have the offloading game that generates second phase play and generates space. If they're offloading there, I think Penrith are panicking a little bit because they generally don't do it. I think they're ranked 7th or 8th for offloading. So middle of the pack, when most of their other stats are outstanding, they're at the 2nd or 1st. And then the other thing is when you look at the way Parramatta, it's interesting. Often when Parramatta play To'o, they actually kick to him early. They like to get him and have him run that first tackle, but get defenders down on him. And get 3 or 4 in the tackle and prevent him from being able to wind up, right? It's like you've taken your best ball runner and he's taken the first run. If you win that first run, Dylan Edwards will run the ball, and he's very similar to Clint Gutherson. He's not going to beat you with just absolute strength and run through you like To'o will.
Yeah.
He'll look for that gap. He'll look to get his shoulders through, look to get his head through and win the play the ball. And Charlie Staines a bit similar. I'm interested to see if Parramatta will try and do what they usually do is go to To'o with the first kick and ask him to kind of generate the set and try and dominate that tackle. Or if they look at Charlie Staines and go, we can pick him up and drive him backwards 10 metres, so let's do that. And then try and get that pressure on there. And the other thing with Penrith is if you stop that go forward and you stop Yeo ball playing and force him to run the ball more, he'll run the ball, but that's kind of not what Penrith want him to do. I think he barely averages 100 metres a game. He's not a ball runner.
He picks and chooses when to run. He picks and chooses when to do what you would call a traditional hit up, but he'll do it when he sees a breakdown in the defensive line, and that's where you see him get through, and then all of a sudden everyone's in trouble, you know.
Yeah.
So you try and get him to get to a point where he's at worst doing just a traditional hit up.
Yeah, he's forced to run the ball because they need him to generate. Well, need him to run the ball as a middle forward.
To go forward, yeah.
You don't want him being able to pick and choose when he runs and pick and choose when he passes, because what that forces Cleary to do is Cleary has to play closer to the ruck, which takes away his greatest strength, which is targeting the outside defenders. If he's got to get close to the ruck, then his sideways run that he does, where he changes his speed and his angle, becomes a lot less effective because he's got to try and get outside the B defender, and they can come up on him and shut the pass down or force him to turn the ball back on the inside. And That's not the way Penrith like to play. Penrith like to go at the edges early. They like to use Kikau and Martin.
I tell you, the other thing it does is that it means that Luai has to do more ball playing as well. And I love him. He's a Mount Druitt boy, but I don't know. I don't know that he is at that level yet. I don't know if he will be able to get to that level yet. He's very good for the sit when Penrith is on a roll. And I guess like most footy players are good when their team's on a roll, right? But when Penrith are on a roll, he has a very niche part in the attack, and he does it really well. Like when he's got good footwork at the line, he can pick out the right guy at times. He can put in a little bit of a kick at times. But I think if you ask him to play a traditional 5/8 role, he's just out of his depth doing it. And that's when we can look clunky. And if you can take Isaiah Yeo out of his role, and then you've got Cleary who's got to, go to plan B, he hasn't got a partner to go to plan B with.
See, Queensland did that really well in the decider. They forced Cleary to try and force the game. And he hasn't, I'm not saying he can't do it, but it's not the way he likes to play. There are some halves that would relish in that, like Andrew Johns, right? You put the pressure on Johns that way, and he'd take the challenge. And Darren Lockyer was one of the best clutch players in history.
You didn't Sean Lockyer because he killed you.
Yeah, I know, but just watching, so long as they weren't playing against Parramatta, those two, but just that ability to be okay playing from behind and finding, they both got Johns and Lockyer both have very different running games to Cleary. Cleary's very much pick and choose. Johns earlier in his career, very good runner of the ball. A little bit less as he got older, which is understandable, particularly with his injuries. And Lockyer, obviously a fullback when he came through the grades. Lightning quick when he first went to 5'8", and then knew how to pick and choose his moment. I just think like you said, you've got to force Cleary to go to plan B, which is promote the ball. And Penrith like to do it on their terms. They don't like being forced to promote the ball. And Parramatta, I think, have to get them. And like we said at the start, it all comes back to scoreboard pressure. If Parramatta can get ahead and keep hold of the lead for a while, and they've almost got to go, look, Penrith, you're throwing everything you've got at us, and it's not working. So you guys have to go to plan B. That's when I think you might see a bit of that panic, like you've spoken about before, when they start to look a bit clunky because they're forcing the passes. Yeah,
and that's when Luai gets the ball, and all of a sudden it's like Kikau's like, are you giving me it, or am I? Like they start breaking down out wide.
Kikau's not sure to keep on his outside run, or if he's going to cut back on the inside, then you see a bit of that stutter step.
Exactly, and at times like this, like part of me, or times like that, I should say, part of me is just like, give the fucking ball to Kikau and get him doing a hit up out wide. Just start putting pressure on physically if you can't do it with your footwork and breaking them down with the ball in hand. Because they like, and that's where sometimes it'll just stop. They'll put a handbrake on, like, last year, when they had Tyrone May, and he would get the ball at times, and it was just a handbrake on the entire attack. Now they managed to still win, even though he was more of a bench player when they got to the grand final. But there was a point where he was starting because of, I think it was suspensions or injury, I can't remember. And he was killing our attack. And Luai can do that sometimes as well. And it really worries me because you don't change something when you win it. And the thing that worries me is that then you lose and then you're like, man, we should have changed that. That's the thing that really worries me. And I've talked about it all year. And it sounds dumb because they won 20 games. They shouldn't have a clunky attack, but their attack gets clunky. It just does.
Yeah. I mean, so as Parramatta's, they can look really clunky. The thing I've liked in the last 2 months, they've averaged roughly, this is Parramatta, they've averaged roughly 30 points scored a game, and they've conceded about 15 points a game. And you see a lot of this discussion, well, Parramatta's defence is the 8th best in the competition. But I almost feel like the 6 again era, you've almost got to start throwing some of those stats out. Like, because there are games where you can lose the plot and you'll just concede points.
Yeah.
You know, it happened. It's happened to South last year. They conceded 50 in a game and still made the grand final.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we got beaten. We got towed up by the Cowboys up in Darwin by 30 odd.
Mm.
And that game ended up meaning nothing by the time it got to finals. You know what I mean? Like it's almost, you can only judge a team basically in their last 2 months of footy because that's the version you're playing at the moment.
Yeah,
Parramatta's changed their entire defensive structure during the middle of the season. They're not defending the way they're defending now. Is not the way they were defending at the start of the season. I think a big part of that too is they've actually got a fit back line now. For the first, I think, 2 months of the year, they were playing Hayes Parham in the centres with Dylan Brown. Then Parham was on the wing. They had Sean Russell on the wing. I think Opacek was injured, so Nakorde was playing there. It was like a dog's breakfast. Every week we had a new player on the wing.
About them at the start of the year, hey, they looked like I was worried that they'd done their dash at the start of the year. In the previous years, I was worried that it had kind of got to them, but they turned it around. You know, they got everything back on track, and you know, as you say, how many times did we see the Storm come out of the blocks in the NRL, kill everyone in the first 3 months of the comp, and then they get to
Origin would hit.
Season. Yeah, and they get to the season, and it was like a giant wave just slowly splashing up against the beach. It just ran out of steam, you know. You want to be good at this time of the year, and Parramatta did it, man. Parramatta did it. They're looking at their best now.
Yeah, exactly. You can't say that they haven't learnt from the previous seasons. They've gone out hard at the start of the year, won 8 in a row, and then the wheels have fallen off. This year they haven't been as consistent probably as they'd like. Interestingly, they haven't lost 2 games in a row, and the most they've managed to win is 3 games in a row. Now, if they were to win on Sunday, they would have won 3 games in a row to win the premiership, which would be kind of neat. You managed to win the comp without winning more than 3 games in a row at any point in the season.
It's a weird one. You know, when we come in against the Storm in that first grand final, and it was like we'd been on some ridiculous streak, you know. And I was like, I don't like streaks. I don't like this. I don't like that when you've got to be like, and they'll break history if they win this one. It's like, oh, I don't like that.
Yeah, well, we did that to Melbourne last year. They were 18 in a row or something.
And
they're like, oh, they're just going to win one more to get the record. We beat them. And it was like, oh shit.
Because the streaks don't mean shit anymore, you know. It's crazy. So okay, I'm going to ask you a question you're not going to want to answer. But I've been answering all my questions. You got to be. I've said all of my dirty laundry on this one, all right, about the things I'm worried about Panthers, all right. So here's your one. What is the thing you do not want to see when you're watching the grand final? What is something that, I don't know, the start of the game in the second half or something? What is something that if you see?
I'll tell you a couple of things.
Okay, go on.
Mistake in our first set. Our right edge rushing up and in early. Because I'm like, Cleary's going to tear us apart if we're up and in too early. See, a lot of people are nervous about Wonga Blake. I honestly don't blame the guy. Like the bombs that Cleary put up to him, good luck catching them, regardless of who you are. They were uncatchable. I blame the forwards for actually not getting to Cleary to put him under pressure to kick it. Yeah, the thing I'm worried about is our middle going soft after the first 25 minutes. I know that we're going to come out firing. You look at our starting middles and you go, that's a starting forward pack. But I'm really worried that if we're behind after the first 25, there's not a lot coming off the bench. I know I've talked about Nathan Brown. Ryan Madison will come on. But yeah, I don't like our chances if we're behind by more than a converted try after the first 25 minutes. That and Penrith have been so good all year that, and I've been burnt enough by Parramatta to know that regardless of all the good feeling you've got coming into the game, there have been plenty of times they've let us down in the past. So I'm not getting too far ahead of myself at all.
You know, the crazy thing is, I think that it's not just Parramatta fans have been burnt by Parramatta at this point. So, I think that's why in that Canberra game a couple of weeks ago, there was this feeling of oh, I think the Raiders are going to beat Parramatta because everyone had been waiting for Parramatta to to do what Parramatta's done in the past. And I've been saying for weeks, like, I want to see Parramatta win a game that matters. And they've done that now. They've done that.
Yeah.
All that shit is out of them because they've won games that fucking matter, except for the grand final. And you can only win the grand final if you're in it, you know?
Exactly.
So all of that shit doesn't matter. But, yeah, I noticed that with the Canberra game where even non-Parramatta fans were like, oh, yeah, I think Parramatta's going to lose that one, you know?
Yeah. Everyone at work has been asking me, because they know I'm a Parramatta nut. They were asking me for score predictions at the start of the final. I said, I'm not giving you any.
Yeah.
I can't do that to myself. Like I said, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I just cannot bring myself to go, yeah, this is going to be the final score, because I just like, I've followed this team for too long to be sure of anything anymore.
Yeah.
You know, like they asked me, are you going to beat Canberra? I'm like, I'm nervous because we're favourites, all right? We're at home, we're favourites. This is like classic bedshit territory. Just like, don't turn up in the first 15 minutes, turn the ball over 4 times, concede 3 tries, and you're just like, oh, well, we'll look at next year. Yeah. And then the Cowboys one, it's like, we haven't beaten the Cowboys up there in 5 years. They've never lost a final at home. And we haven't made a grand final in over a decade. Like, surely this is when we don't turn up. And as I said to you, I thought we were gone when Murray Taulagi scored in the second half. I thought that was it. We were shot. I saw our heads go down. Just went, I don't think we're going to come back from here. So, I mean, on the other side of things, there's a lot of positives in that they turned it around and came back from behind. And there's obviously a very driven side there that refused to give up. And the game could have been lost and they could have just fallen to pieces thinking, oh, no, what's happening again. But like I said, I can't be sure of anything.
Mate,
if someone asked me for a prediction, I'm going to tell them to come back to me at 10 o'clock on Sunday night.
Yeah. Look, any other supporter from any other team, I'd be like, oh, they're just pessimistic. A Parramatta fan, I'm like, dude, I get it. I get it completely, you know? And we all do. We all get it for Parramatta fans. Because
it's not pessimism, it's realism.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're not pessimistic at all. You're going on fucking history here.
Yeah, we do not have a good history in these games. Do you understand me? Like, it wasn't until some of the women at work were just asking me some questions about it, and I'm like, they're like, why are you so nervous? And I'm like, I said 97, 98, 99, 2000, no grand finals, very good team. 2001, best side in the competition by a country mile, lost the grand final. 2005, minor premiers, bed shit the preliminary final. 2009, bloody came nearly last, made the grand final, lost. 2017, top 4, bow out in the second week of the finals. 2018, wooden spoon. You can't predict anything with this club.
Yeah.
I said, now we're at this stage where we haven't, apart from Ryan Madison, none of them have been here before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what terrifies me the most, is that, okay, one, there's no scars. That's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
None of our players can go, oh, shit, we're going to lose another grand final. Bloody Madison's won the only one he's played in, so that's a good thing. Second thing is, does the moment get to them? Does so something hit them when they run out in that 83,000 crowd and they're going, oh, shit, like, holy shit, we're at a grand final type of thing, which I think is what happened to Penrith in 2020. They were all good.
And they're looking across at the great Cameron Smith. He's like, fucking, I live here.
Yeah, who's played more finals games than some people have careers.
Yes.
You know, and you just go, oh, I don't know what I'm doing here, kind of thing. Or, I mean, in saying that, you know, do they get out there and just look at that crowd and go, because I think there's going to be a huge chunk of it's going to be Parramatta fans.
Yeah.
Given how quickly tickets sold out. Do they look at that and go, this is for them, this is us? And then just, you know, they go out and play the game of their lives.
Look, I look at 2003's grand final where you had a Panthers team that was, for the most part, very inexperienced, and they're coming up against a team who had been in the finals, been there, done that, won trophies.
Defending premiers.
Yep. And they didn't give a fuck.
Yeah.
And they went out and bashed the shit out of the Roosters, beat them at their own game, and, you know, they got the trophy. Sometimes all of it goes out the window, and you don't know until you're watching it happen. And the thing that I'm interested to see is is if the Panthers' journey that they've been on has turned them into something we don't realise yet, where like if they win this grand final, we're like, oh, this is what we fucking think of the Storm as, but the Storm didn't even do this. Like, there's a possibility this Panthers team is something more than we realise at the moment. And as you say, that in a few years from now, we'll kind of look at with more perspective on what they've achieved overall and say, holy shit, like this is fucking crazy. Or they'll lose to Parramatta tomorrow, on Sunday, sorry. And
don't bring the game 2 days earlier. My heart can't handle it.
Yes. That's tomorrow, aren't you going to bet? Yeah, so that's why we play the game. The last thing I want to ask you, because I know I've kept you over time a little bit, that's just one last personal question. Have you done something this week or not done something this week because you are superstitious? Because I considered not shaving my face because I hadn't shaved it for a couple of weeks, and I was like, if I shave my face, I'm going to lose this fucking game. Have you done something like that?
No, I haven't done something like that.
So it's your fault. All right. Thanks for no. Go on. Sorry.
No, I'm like a little superstitious, but it's more about predicting results. I don't do that when it comes to Parramatta. I don't predict results, and I always get asked, particularly this past week. I get asked, how do you think they'll go on the weekend? I'm like, oh, I think that they'll play a good game. Basically, I'm not saying they're going to win the comp. I'm not telling you a score. I'm saying nothing like that. Because that would haunt me if I tipped us to win and we didn't. That's probably as superstitious as I get. But I've been like that for most of the past few years too.
This is the one game I can remember where I have been like, I don't want to. I don't feel comfortable saying. Like, I can say to you, I can say to you that if you go by everything we've seen, that if I had to guess what happens most likely or what I think we might see Penrith do what they've done a bunch of times before, where it's close game early on, they wear Parramatta out and they kind of walk away with it. I've said walk away, not run away with it over the last few days. That's as close as I feel comfortable saying, hey.
Yeah, I've actually noticed that there's not a lot of Penrith fans predicting they'll win, and the same for Parramatta.
Yeah.
Last year there was a lot of Penrith's going to just run over Souths.
Yeah.
They're the best team in the comp by a country mile. Souths probably aren't the second best team in the competition. They got there because they're playing some good footy at the right end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
But, they've managed to get their way into the grand final. I think obviously these two sides are a lot closer, and I think the fact that Parramatta beat Penrith twice during the regular season has added to that. Mm-hmm. Like, they're the only team to do it, so everyone's kind of gone, well, I don't know, Like, if Moses has played, every time he's played 80 minutes against Penrith this year, he's won. But grand finals are different. But also, that can be a factor, the fact that Parramatta has managed to win, so they know in themselves they can beat them. And then, as you've said, there's also the first week of the finals, that result there. Who does that impact the most?
Mm.
But yeah, very much like you, I'm not confident to really tip either way as to how this one's going to go.
Well, I think it's fair to say we're both nervous now. I think
this has made me more nervous.
It's made me more nervous, you bastard. Look, thank you for coming on. I knew I knew a couple of weeks ago, I was like, should I get him on now? Should I get it? And then when they made the grand final, I'm like, I'm getting him on now. If he's got time, I'm getting him on now. So thank you for coming on. Good luck on the weekend. I hope whatever happens, you enjoy it. Congratulations. I think you can celebrate now, and I think you can be super confident.
No, thank you. I'll take the congrats for actually making a grand final, but nothing beyond
that. Where can we find you, mate?
Well, I'm the owner of One Ideal, so you can check that out there, oneideal.com, and I also run Rugby League Monthly, so you can just check that out, rugbyleaguemonthly.com. I'm hoping to have a new edition out tomorrow for the grand final previews. Sorry, normally I'm a little more, how you'd say, down the middle, but I'm all Parramatta this month for October.
Mate, anybody that doesn't like it can get stuffed, honestly, because you got to enjoy it. And it's like, I'm happy for everyone that's enjoying this week, and it's going to be whatever happens. We have a moment for both of our clubs that is going to on Sunday night. It's going to be something we will all remember one way or another, and I love their moments in rugby league. It's going to be so good. And our teams are here. How many years did you and I both watch our teams thinking, I wish we were friggin' relevant, you know?
Yes.
Well,
we're a decade of that.
We're the two best clubs in the world. Anybody that doesn't like it can get stuffed. Thank you for coming on. And, excuse me, I'll get you on sometime next week if you're free, and if not, a little bit after that, and we can do a post-mortem.
Yep, no worries, not a problem.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll catch you soon.
Oh, Palmerbet with the big don't argue. Punters will love that. Download our app today and enjoy tackle-busting benefits with great promos, great odds, and same-game multi this footy finals at Parmerbet. Gamble responsibly. For Gamblers' Help, call 1-800-858-858.